Hi, everyone. This is Tom Parmalee, the founder of funeralvision.com. And today I'm joined by Mitch Smith with eFuneral Partner, which helps funeral homes reach a new generation of consumers with an easy to use online planning tool. Mitch will be one of our speakers at Mastermind, Elevating Your Funeral Service Business to New Heights, which will be Thursday, September 11th at the Live Casino and Hotel in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The title of his presentation will be The Future of Pre-Need Funeral Planning, Insights into Consumer Trends and Technology Innovation. Thanks so much for joining me, Mitch.
Thanks for having me.
First, for those listening who may not be familiar with eFuneral, tell us what you offer funeral homes, how many you work with, and how it fits into the ecosystem of homesteaders.
Great question. I think out of the gate, if we were to go back and think about naming conventions of the organization, we probably could have done some restructuring, but we are a homesteaders company. So we work with homesteaders funeral homes around the country. We have about 800 and some change. I haven't looked this morning. When we first started, we found that there was a pretty decent gap in the market, and there was a large amount of transactions that were going to be changing over time when we think about consumer behavior. So we spent a lot of time researching consumer habits. We spent a lot of time working with homesteaders and outside vendors, and we created a system that allows families to go onto the funeral home website and plan pre-need and even purchase at need 100% electronically. So the concept from us is really to expand and create a digital storefront, which in our mind really is another location for that funeral home. As we think about how consumers are interacting and behaving, everything is about their own type of research and how they're getting confidence before they make a phone call or work with that business directly. We want to put those funeral homes in a position where they can check all those boxes. So when the consumer is ready to engage, they have all the confidence they need to proceed.
So if I'm a funeral home and I don't currently write business with homesteaders, but I want to take advantage of the eFuneral platform, what does that funeral home need to do? Do they then need to start, writing at least some business with homesteaders, or what is the process?
Great question. So, no, from a homesteader's perspective, you do not have to write the majority of your business through homesteaders. The policies that we generate will be homesteaders policies. And I think over time, they'll see the value and the merit of a lot of the things that homesteaders brings to the table. But it really is up to them how they want to run their business.
So a funeral home may never have written business with homesteaders before, but they can still test this out, use eFuneral, and see how it goes.
No questions asked. And homesteaders and all the large insurance companies are aware of all the funeral homes in the country, though there's a lot of people that change hands or change names. So there may be, when we connect with that funeral home, we'll make sure we have all the data correct on the homesteader side. We can handle any appointment or all of that. That's a pretty quick DocuSign exchange. But yeah, we do it all the time. Very, very simple process.
Well, that's great to know. You've been in the death care profession since 2018. And you have an interesting background. So why don't you walk us through that a little bit and what was appealing to you about getting into this space?
Great question. So I think it was two or three things. So my background has been in marketing for a long time. I have my MBA in marketing. I worked across a lot of large organizations, insurance companies. I worked in the banking sector. I worked in payment processing sector for a period of time. And when Luke Freeberg, our previous president of eFuneral, reached out to me, and I've had a personal relationship with Luke for a long time, and we had an opportunity to sit down and talk through this. And for me, there was two things that I really, really focused on. Number one was an opportunity to come in and build a culture, to empower the people at eFuneral to do their best work for the funeral profession and for themselves and for their families. And then number two, it was a profession that I think the more I thought about it, I'm like, it's not only is it not going to stop growing, but it's not going to stop iterating. I've worked across a lot of other professions that had kind of come to a halt. You think about things like banking, they can only be so innovative because regulations and things can slow them down. As I was researching different funeral home technologies and websites and the amount of money that was changing hands, it was exciting because there was this runway that hadn't even been laid yet. This tremendous opportunity for the future growth of these funeral homes to truly, truly, truly go to the next level. And for me, that was very exciting.
Now, I know you're a big proponent of funeral homes, making it easy for families to find information, but not necessarily pricing information, correct? And what information should they make it easy for families to find?
That's a great question. And I think I think of when this started, Luke and I did a a webinar around the potential funeral rule change for the FTC. And whether that does or doesn't happen, for me, it's always been kind of a disconnect in logic. I don't have to get that information at a doctor. I don't have to have that information at a mechanic or somewhere else where I may have a large output of money. I'm not juxtaposing the funeral profession against those professions, but there's plenty of places where I walk into the organization and I don't fundamentally know what the next steps are. So pricing for me is 100% a decision of the funeral home. Whether the FTC makes that change or not, I believe the information should be controlled and dictated in a way that the funeral home feels comfortable. But Tom, what I do really feel strongly about is when I am a consumer, and I would love everyone to put themselves in the shoes of something that they've bought recently. If I am beginning to research, the first step in my research almost always is going to be what Google, Bing, or some other search engine provides me. So from there, I'm going to be met automatically with other alternatives. Those alternatives could be paid for, they could be elevated, it could be on a map. So from there, I'm now going to say, okay, which one of these fits my next criteria? Is it location? Is it number of ratings? Could be a whole series of things. So as I start to dig deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, the more elusive businesses will be about their information. And again, it doesn't have to be pricing because you can have an expose or a video. You could have things that show the families what you do differently and then encourage them to come talk to you. If you're just using the standard templated websites, and trust me, those are great. The Tukios and the funeral ones, the Tribute Text, they're doing a good job with this content. But if it's the same as everyone and you're not standing out, the risk you're running is if you don't tell your story, someone else will tell it for you.
That's a great point. Now, if I'm a funeral home owner, a couple of my big concerns really will be the value of my business and also my market share, and those two are closely intertwined, really. So, how can a robust and efficient pre-need program, particularly one with an online presence, help a funeral home in those areas?
Absolutely. This feels like working with insurance providers and trust providers. It's like, let me grab my soapbox. But the concept of the pre-need is really just how do I solidify future market share? And I just got done doing a presentation, and it'll be a version of the presentation I give when we're together in Philadelphia that talks about consumer habits changing. And it's funny because you show these statistics and it doesn't surprise anybody, but then you start to juxtapose that against how they want to acquire products and services. And then it really puts us in a position to say, are we doing our best work for the funeral families that we're going to service? So you always want to have more pre-need. You want to build that book, whether it is a future call volume or acquisition mindset, that those are always going to be good. But when you think about the online version of it, and again, I'm not saying that you need to have a way to transact from end to end on your website. If you have a fickle consumer who's on your website who's looking for information, you may lose that consumer. The risk a lot of the funeral homes have talked to me about is I don't want to be disintermediated from the conversation. I don't want to minimize the things that I do, and I don't want to drive to the bottom. We're not doing that. We're seeing a 15% higher average sale. We are not funeral directors. We are putting them in touch with the funeral home. And our goal is to get those people online to maybe pique their interest sooner than they would have, or pique their interest prior to them being served as an at-need family. The faster I can get that person in touch with the funeral home or that person into a pre-need contract so that the funeral home can have a relationship and engagement, the faster they can spread the word, the faster they can ask for referrals, and that book just builds and builds and builds. eFuneral for me is simply a tool in the toolbox. It is not a silver bullet.
Now, it almost seems like a distant memory now because it's been a while, but I imagine the COVID-19 pandemic must have been a period of tremendous growth for eFuneral. What are some of the lessons you learned going through that? Maybe some things that are still in place that have helped you as a business and in turn, help funeral homes.
Absolutely. Number one, I've never seen a series of people, a group of people, and my dad's a fireman, and there's just certain people that are built to serve. So when that all happened, the number of funeral homes that just rolled their sleeves up and made stuff work was outrageously phenomenal. From a business perspective, I would say the biggest thing you're seeing on the funeral home side, and you're continuing to see it, is elevation of costs, attention from consumers being lower and lower. But the biggest thing for us, the biggest surprise and change was consumer habits change, not because of their feelings, but businesses met them where they were ready to purchase. So think about grocery stores, Door Dashes. These companies made everything so easy to acquire information and have it brought right to your door, to the point that someone will pay 30, 40, 50% more for a product or a meal just so they don't have to go to acquire it. So this has created a world where we are very comfortable sitting in our home office, sitting in our car, driving around at work, whatever, moving onto a device to acquire information. Before COVID, we were seeing a huge spike in traffic to our websites. But what COVID did was take people that were traditionally tech non-savvy and force them to adapt to an Android or an iPad or whatever device they were using. So what we've seen is that my consumers aren't tech savvy. We're not really hearing that because people are absolutely living on these devices and they know how to use them. So it's, how do I create a system that's intuitive? How does the funeral home have the right experience? And how do they work with the Googles and the Facebooks to make sure that they are clickable or ready when that family is ready to engage?
I think for me, like before the pandemic, it would be somewhat rare for me to have a conversation via Zoom like we are having now. Now it's almost the reverse. If I'm just having a phone call with someone, that almost feels a little odd because I'm so used to seeing someone face to face.
No.
So that that point rings true for me. Now, last question. At Mastermind, September 11th in Philadelphia, why don't you just share one or two takeaways, things that you hope attendees will walk away with after hearing your full presentation, which will go into a lot more detail into some of the topics that we're just touching upon here.
So there's two things. We're going to briefly in the presentation talk about AI and some future tools that are coming. And then also we're going to be starting off the entire presentation with this concept. There was a book that was written by Chip Heath and one other person. So if that other person listens in here, I apologize. But the book was about ideas that stick. So how a adjustable wrench became a monkey wrench, how a box of facial tissues became Kleenex. And they have this notion in the book called the curse of knowledge. Once you have information in your head, it's hard to unknow it. And so as we lay this out, what I encourage everyone in the room to think about is, as we're talking about my presentation and everyone else is in the room, and we're truly looking to shift our ideology, we need to understand what we know versus what the consumer knows. So if I have a family that comes and sits down at my table, or I go into their home, I should not be surprised that they say, I have no idea what I want to do. I shouldn't be surprised that they say, hey, what's your lowest cost? The consumers only know two questions. When can I get it and what does it cost? An opportunity for us is to say, how do we educate our staff to steer those conversations in a different way? And how do we work with folks like you, Tom, to project messages out to the mass population that lets them know these things are different and there's different ways to have these services? Those are large ideological things that we'll address potentially in the presentation. But that curse of knowledge is to say, hey, I need to set down my understanding of what I think I know and look at what I'm about to learn through the lens of who I'm trying to serve. And then the latter part of that is AI, which I think has become very terrifying for a lot of funeral homes. Number one, it's just two letters that get thrown around without a whole lot of context. So when I think AI, I think, a large algorithm and these giant disks that sit in some warehouse somewhere in Silicon Valley that process information quickly. The fear that I've had a lot of presentations recently where I've talked to funeral homes and they say, hey, I'd love to use this for obituary writing, but how does it make me safe? How do I ensure that my staff and my team are not dumping information into this world that I can't control? So we'll be talking about some of those tools. It's how do I kind of uncross my arms and listen to the content? How do I really think about meeting my consumers where they are? And then how do I pick the right vendors for AI, security, data, whatever, so that I, as the funeral home, who may not have an acumen in technology or security, can feel confident that I'm giving my consumers the right products.
Well, Mitch, I want to thank you so much for being a speaker at Mastermind in Philadelphia on September 11th, and also for being one of our platinum sponsors of the event. To learn more about Mastermind, elevating your funeral service business to new heights, just visit mastermindfuneral.com, or you can click on the events tab on funeralvision.com. The event is approved by the Academy for CEUs, as well as for CEUs in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Maryland, numerous other states. We applied to New Jersey, just waiting to hear back from them. Plus, the hotel is a very short walk from Philly Stadium, who are playing the Mets while we are in town. The the timing of the games are actually perfect for our conference because you won't miss anything. You can boost your networking time with the speakers, fellow attendees. So, take note of that as well. Mitch, thank you so much for joining me today and being part of our mastermind event.
Tom, thanks for having me.